Thank you. Most of the things I'm going to talk about are standard business kind of things that you have to do, but some of them have unique applications due to the nature of biomass in its current state. And so, as I thought about how I was going to make this presentation, being an economist and a former farmer, risk is a big thing. How do we deal with all of the risks involved in running a business in a very dynamic situation? And so, as I thought about biomass and its risks, I thought there were three main areas. Market risks. There are market risks that are associated both with the outputs that you participate with, whether it's going to be heat or whether it's going to be electricity or whether it's going to be some kind of liquid, either as an alcohol or as a petroleum alternative. And then you have the technology risks. That is, when you're kind of in an infant industry, the technologies that you start with can change on you very rapidly and can leave you with some stranded capital. Then with an infant industry situation that we're in, we also suffer some from public policy risks. That is, if we're trying to restore the West and to use the forest products as a source of biomass, if public policy changes, it has dramatic effects on your ability to receive those kinds of materials from the forest, or it loosens them up and makes them more accessible. And on the other side, there's the regulatory risks. So far, the carbon dioxide quagmire has not been formally put into a policy, and how biomass carbon dioxide gets put into regulatory things will have a big effect. So I want to talk a little bit about some of these infant industry risks relative to market. As the previous presenters have talked about, we have an undeveloped distribution system. That holds both in the technologies that you get to do the various things and in the outputs. If you were to produce 10,000 gallons of petroleum substitute, who would you get to refine it for you? And under what conditions? There isn't a market that's been established for that. So those kinds of things are risks. We have some unproven or some unimproved kinds of technologies, things that are just on the frontier and things that have been coming forth, but we don't know exactly how they'll work. If you have a long history in your mind, you can think of John Deere tractors when they ran on 2 cylinders. It was a modification of the old hit and miss engines. If you go to county fairs and things, often in the antique machinery thing, they will have these old hit and miss engines. And that's kind of where I think we are in the biomass kind of things. We're on that frontier, and maybe we're going to move into 2-cylinder John Deere soon, but we're quite a ways from tractors that don't have steering wheels anymore because they're all GPS controlled. Right? So in the biomass thing, that's kind of where I see us. The engineers and things are working on those quickly, and just how fast they're able to proceed will be forthcoming. Another thing is that there are few or no economies of scale. Because of the nature of biomass at its current condition, it is used close to where it's produced. In the farming thing, we don't see silage being trucked very far. You know, if we could turn it into hay, we can truck it to California from Beaver County and do all those kinds of things. But when I see corn trucks on the road, I can guarantee you they're not going more than 12 miles. All right? And so that's kind of where we are with these kinds of technologies. So in the power producing thing, there may be some economies of scale only if the resource, the biomass, is already pre-concentrated into an area, and that area happens to be sitting next to a transmission line that might be sitting next to a production plant, so that in Utah, where we have the low electricity costs, we can use the heat side, generate electricity, and provide heat into the processing plant, and use some concentrated waste from some other thing, and that kind of biomass might work in a larger scale. But in most of our cases at the current time, we're going to have a fairly local area where we can actually benefit from the production of the energy part of the biomass, simply because of the technology. And I think that we have what I call the dastardly 3 Ds, right? We got density problems. We have a low density, volume-wise. We have a big volume with smaller amounts of energy. We have long distances to get some of that woody biomass from where it is in the west deserts and the juniper and pinyon into a population area. And we have the diversity issue. That is, all kinds of biomass exists. Okay, and we're going to use the USDA definition where it's broad. Okay, what is biomass? Well, is pinyon juniper different? I know that the pinyon and the juniper are different. Okay, how do they react in the biomass process? Okay, or do they act differently than Douglas fir that's been beetle killed? You know, all of those kinds of various feedstocks that we have pouring into the system. Okay? And one of the things that they talked about now was the standardization of the output. And that's a big problem right now, because one load of biomass will not be like the next one or the one before it. And so we have to have a technology that can use a wide variety of feedstocks and still produce you a consistent kind of an output. Most infant industries require government support if entering an established industry. Okay? Nobody wants biomass for itself in large quantities, right? You might use some in your garden, but you just don't want it for itself. You want it for what it provides for you. And then I'll get back to that a little bit. But you have price risks, both with inputs and outputs. Okay? You have any control over the price of diesel fuel when you're out there harvesting? No, you don't. That's a risk. You know? Do you have any control over the price you're going to get for your output? And how long of control do you have over that? Okay. Kind of depends on whether you have contracts or not. Okay. In economics, we talk about a derived demand. That is, biomass's value is derived from another product that people actually want. Okay. So if you want a warm house, you're using biomass not for itself, but because it provides heat. If you want to turn on the lights, you might want biomass not for itself, but because it can be used as a feedstock to create electricity, which you can use to turn on the light. So those kinds of things mean that no matter what happens in the marketplace, you're going to have less control over the price of your products than if you were producing a product that they want as an end product. Okay? Energy is mainly a commodities market. That is, buyers have many options as to fill their needs. Over my lifetime, I have watched the fuel that people have used to put on their irrigation pumps go from electricity to LP gas to diesel fuel back to electricity several times, because what they wanted to do was get the water out of the ground, and they were looking for the cheapest way to do it at the moment. Okay? And so that's energy is not quite as fungible as money, but it is fungible. You can transfer it from one use to another and to do those kind of things. And as a result, biomass producers will have very little control over the prices they receive for their outputs. And the other thing is that biomass by itself will not be able to determine the price of energy because of all the other alternatives. Technology risks. A lot of the things that are being used have changed very little. Some of them in the heating side have. But if you're going to do a coal gasification or a biomass gasification kind of things, they were doing those in the late 1800s. And we're using technologies that use those as the basis. And we're going through that process of looking at all kinds of alternatives to that particular processes to get there. And so there will be some dramatic changes that are going to be coming along. With technology change, there is always the chance of stranded investment. That is, the technology you're using is displaced. Right? How many of you use a Royal typewriter? How many of you have a typewriter? Stranded investment. Right? Inefficient operation compared to others in the industries as they adopt the new technologies. Okay? I don't know if you remember the Wang word processor. So if you're above a certain age, you do. Okay? They led in word processing. But as the personal computer came along, they were unwilling to make changes in their technology, and they don't exist. Okay? And that's one of the risks you run when technologies begin to change. Okay? Public policy risks. Risks of reduced or elimination of biomass. The access to biomass on public lands. And that's especially important for those of us here in the West where a great deal of our biomass is located on the public lands. Okay? There's also the risk that research funding for technology could change. Every time a new administration comes on, they have a different set of policy priorities. And if energy isn't one of those, then there's a chance that's going to happen. Or if they believe in another type of energy. Okay? And then there's the risk of changing environmental regulations. They can all affect your costs. Okay? Well, how do we manage these risks? The first one is to understand the market you're in. And to realize in the beginning that you're probably going to be in a local biomass market. And it's going to be in a limited size. Just because of the technologies and transportation issues. With few exceptions. Okay? And so you're going to have to know what those things that affect that particular market in which you're going to participate are. Okay. If, let's say that we're going to do our woody biomass and we're going to do it to produce heat, okay, and my market already has natural gas in it, I'm going to have a very tough time competing with natural gas. Okay? But if I live in Kanab and they don't have natural gas and I'm competing with trucked in propane, I may have a chance. Okay? So it's a matter of doing your market research and figuring out what your market really is and what the product really is you're trying to sell. And then figuring out how you're going to compete with others who want to fill that need. Okay? And that includes both your inputs and your outputs. Okay? There was a thing that was proposed to do biomass and turn it into composts and those kind of things for price. And it looked really good until we did the feasibility study and found out that on the scale he wanted to do it with, there wasn't enough feedstock close enough to make it profitable. And it died. Well, it was sure a lot better that it died at that point than after they bought all the equipment, land, all those other things, and put everything, all the inputs in. My grandfather used to say to me, "Kid, make all of your mistakes with a pencil, not with concrete." You know, because I wanted to build a new corral. And he wanted me to go back and make sure that I had it designed so all the gates were where they needed to be. I could get cattle flow, do all of those things on paper, not pour the concrete and find out it didn't work. Okay? And so I think that's one of the things we ought to learn. Okay? The other thing is try to tie down as many of the inputs and outputs by contract as you can. Add as much certainty as you can to your operation. Okay. That reduces risk if you know what some of the elements are going to be. On the output side, know who's going to buy it, how much they're going to buy it, over what time frame, and what price they're going to pay. Okay. If you can't answer those questions, figuring I can sell ice to an Eskimo, you know, you might not be dealing with Eskimos in Alaska, you know. You might have a totally different kind. Okay? Or you might have people that tell you, yeah, I'll take so many tons of that. Yeah, I'll take so much of that. Yeah, I'll take some of that. And you show up with a 2-ton truckload and they want 200 pounds. Yeah, that'll satisfy me and my customers for months. Okay? Make sure you have that. Okay? In some of your markets on your purchasing side, you'll have the opportunity to use both contracts and you'll be able to use some hedging by forwarding some costs, especially with petroleum and those other kinds of commodities that you might use. If you're going to use. And then I want you to make sure that you use sensitivity analysis to evaluate your market risks. Okay? Sensitivity analysis is really a simple concept. When you do your budgets and your pro formas, you have what you expect, right? And that's the numbers you put in your costs and revenues and the equipment you're going to use and all of that kind of stuff. Well, once you have that base one done, then go back and drop the price of the product by 10% and see what happens to your bottom line. Okay? Raise it by 10% and see what happens to your bottom line. Okay? Do that on the revenue side for all the different products you're going to be selling. See which products and which price ranges are the most sensitive. This will give you an indication as to where you want to spend your time marketing. Okay? You want to do the most work where you get the greatest return. Okay? And then you go to the cost side. And you do the same kind of thing. One time I was asked to come in and help this company. And they says, we need to do this. You know, and they were working on trying to refine a part of their expenses that was so minute that if we eliminated that expense altogether, we changed their profit line by less than 1 cent per unit. Okay? Put your time and effort figuring out where the reward comes. Okay? So when you do your profit and loss statements or your income statements, look on your expenses and find out which ones, just looking at them, are the biggest. Small changes in your biggest costs will have profound outcomes, either on making it profitable or losing money. Do those. And then look at alternative methods of production relative to that base to see if you can move those costs and shift them and to reduce them. Spend your time looking at those things that are going to give you the greatest bang for your buck. Okay. One time I went back and visited with a long time ago when International Harvester was still International Harvester, and I went to an engine plant with my local dealer. And they had there a row of machines that were honing out the blocks and putting all the taps in and doing all of the things on the block so that they could put it together. There was one guy. He sat on a chair on the far end, and there were 26 of those machines down this side and 26 down that side. And they all had a little light. And when the light went from green to red, he jumped up, ran down to that machine, turned it off, ran over to the wall, and called somebody to come fix it, and went back and sat on his chair. Right? He was making something like $56 an hour. Okay? But per engine block, he was irrelevant. Right? If they fired him, it wouldn't have cost me 5 cents on the engine in my 856. Right? So look at your production methods and what's going on and work on those things that actually matter. And you can do that, okay? The other thing you need to learn how to do is understand and interpret what a balance sheet is telling you. Okay? It's telling you something different than your income statements. Okay? What it's telling you is whether you're going to survive or not. What your income statement or your P&L telling is if you're making money this week. Okay? I had many dairy farmer friends who are no longer in the dairy farming business simply because they thought if there was money in the checkbook, they were doing okay. And there was money in the checkbook, but pretty soon they weren't doing okay. Because they didn't know what their true financial position was, because they didn't know how to read a balance sheet. In fact, the bank probably made it up for them, or their accountant made it up for them. And they didn't understand what it was. They just took it in to their banker, and their banker looked at this and that and says, yeah, you got enough assets. If you go broke, I get my money back. I don't care. And that's what happened. Okay? Take some time to learn basic fundamentals. Okay. The other thing that I want to tell you, if you're an entrepreneur, sign all the checks yourself. Don't let the accountant pay the bills. You have to know where every one of your dollars is going. Okay? So, those are just sound basic principles, and sometimes as entrepreneurs we get caught up in the product side or the activity side, and it's the finance side that's going to kill us. Okay? Technology risk. If this is a technology that is going to get stuck, spread it over as many as investors as you can. Right? Each of you can take a small hit. One of you taking a big hit will do you in. Okay? Evaluate your technologies of choice. In an infant industry like this, it's probably best to choose a technology that has another use. Okay? So that it doesn't get stuck. You can do something else with it. Okay? And look at the rate of change. I would expect that the rate of change in processing is the one that's going to be the most dramatic. And maybe the one in transportation. Harvesting, I don't think there's going to be a lot of dramatic change. Right? They've had a long time learning how to cut down trees and chop corn. They're just now figuring out how to chop down trees and chop them up. You're just moving one kind of technology to the other. Okay? Processing, whether it's partial processing in the woods or complete processing at the plant, there's going to be some dramatic changes. Okay? And choose the technologies that are appropriate for the size of the market you're in. Right? Don't try to get too big too quick. Okay. Public policy risk. The number one risk I see is people trying to make things partisan. Okay? Do not make biomass a partisan issue. Right? Energy policy, forest health should not be partisan. Right? Everybody should want healthy forests and a sound, solid energy policy. Don't make it partisan, okay? And work with others. When I was a dairy farmer, everybody thought we were toast because Reagan wanted to cut our subsidy. Well, he got shot the day he was in the hospital. We overrode his veto with our friends in the Congress because there was lots of us. Okay? It wasn't a single dairyman, it was lots of us. So there needs to be lots of us in the biomass working on policies that make sound sense for the forests, for their restoration, for energy policy, for air quality, for all of those things that shouldn't be partisan. We need to work together. Teamwork works. Okay? In summary, biomass is a risky business. Risks must be managed. Business financial tools can be used to evaluate risks. Use them. Okay? Develop a biomass industry. It's a work in progress. Join with others. Be involved. Okay? And I think the ride's going to be rough. But I think in the long run, the outcome can be good if we work together. Okay? Thank you.